Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Maruna, and I'm the Public Relations Coordinator here at the library. We're so happy to welcome a packed house tonight. Tonight, Dennis Blocker will discuss his research that was turned into The Heart of Hell by Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Mitch Weiss. The Heart of Hell is the untold story of the crew of Landing Infantry 449, based on 130 exclusive interviews with sailors who survived the Battle of Iwo Jima, the families of the men killed in the fight, and more than 1,500 letters the sailors mailed to loved ones during their long months at sea. This is a story of duty, brotherhood, love, and courage. Among the sailors was Leo Bedell of Stow. Leo was the youngest officer on the ship and became the ship's engineering officer. There will be a Q&A presentation after the show, and please welcome me in joining Dennis Blocker to our library.
Sound okay? Is the mic? Anybody hear me? In the back? We're good? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here tonight. This is quite surreal for me, as this journey began over 14 years ago, from the events that you will hear about soon. It's a very, very special time for me to be here. I've traveled across Iowa and Wisconsin and Texas where I'm from, and without doubt, this is the one place that I am most excited to be at, and you'll find out why tonight. You know, some journeys start out because of a burning bush. Some journeys start out because the Lady of the Lake throws Excalibur your way. My journey began with a .22 caliber bullet. I like to play that movie beforehand because I think it sets the tone for what we're about to talk about. It's serious business. These are real people. No names were changed. The events that take place in the book all really happened. And a lot of people who are here today were directly affected by that. All of the family of Bedell family, would you please raise your hand? All the Bedells. Family of Leroy Young, please raise your hand. So, come with me on my journey to the heart of hell. This is my grandfather, Clifford Frederick Lemke. He's from a town in northern Wisconsin, a logging country called Park Falls. He was born on February 5th, 1925, and he comes from a family of loggers. He is a grandson of German immigrants, and hardworking, rough and rowdy area of Wisconsin. And his father was a carpenter. If you think about it in the context of the Great Depression and everything that was going on at that time, being a carpenter was a wise choice. See, all of my grandpa's uncles were all loggers. And that was in that part of the country, you can only do logging in the wintertime because it's marsh country during the summer. And so you were without a job, essentially. So you had to be very imaginative in the ways that you would come up with work. And sometimes that meant that they would do long hauls across country. And one thing that was common among those Lemke brothers, the five of them, one of them being my great-grandfather, Fred, one thing common among them is that they were hard-drinking German guys. All right? And what that usually meant was that a lot of the money sometimes was drunk away. Okay? And the kids would do without. And that didn't appeal to Fred Lemke at all, my great-grandfather. So he became a carpenter. When I was doing research for this journey, and I actually visited Park Falls, we stayed at the home of Eva Lemke, one of my grandfather's nieces, and I was told that my great-grandpa had actually installed the cabinets in the kitchen. So I went to the kitchen. This would have been installed in the 50s. I went into the kitchen. This was 2 years ago. Got a hold of them really good and went. They were solid. This just in that one little motion, it said everything about his character. It was good work. It stood the test of time. And he imbued that sense of character into my grandfather, who also took up carpentry and was a hard worker and a man of his word. On December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor was bombed, and my grandfather, he wanted to do his part. And he was all excited, and he was caught up in all the fervor, and he went to my great-grandfather, Fred, and he says, "Dad, I want to sign up, but the recruiter says I can't go in unless you sign because I'm 17. Fred Lemke says, "I'm not signing for you to go in." You see, Fred Lemke had served in World War I. He had served in the ambulance corps. And he would tell family in latter years that when he was taking casualties from the front, and he was taking them to the field hospital, that he would hear the guys, every time that the ambulance hit a little rut, there was no shocks, they were hard rubber tires, and every time they hit a rut, it would jostle, and he would hear the guys scream out in the back. And by the time that he got to the hospital, inevitably, every time he took a load of casualties, there were always dead guys when they opened the doors. And he hadn't wondered if he hadn't killed any of them just from transport. So you can imagine his 17-year-old son coming in and says, "Dad, can I go to war? Will you sign so I can go in early?" The answer is no. Here's a picture that I got on this research. I actually got a picture of my great-grandfather Fred in World War I sitting on the hood of his ambulance. And for me to see that picture and to be handed an actual, authentic 100-year-old picture by the Lemke relatives who gave it to me, to see that brought tears to my eyes because I work in EMS. And to see how something in your ancestors can submerge and pop up with you generations later, now me working EMS and ambulance, that meant a lot to me. So Fred says, "No, I'm not signing up for you to go. You're going to have to wait until you turn 18 and I have nothing to do with it." So Clifford Lemke's flipping through the Park Falls Herald, and he sees this ad in the paper which is advertising War Manpower Recruiting Team looking for folks to work in southern Wisconsin at Baraboo at the new Badger Ordnance Works, their ammunition plant. Look what they're advertising: good pay, vacation with pay, group insurance, low fares and special bus lines, good living conditions, 8 hours a day, 48 hours a week, shower, bath, cafeteria. They've got a rec hall, they've got movie theater, you've got Baraboo, which is close by, with all the young ladies who are all single because all the guys have gone off to war. Why wouldn't you go? So Cliff is excited. He says to Fred, "Can I go?" Fred thinks it's a great idea. He gets on the bus and he heads down to the Badger Ammunition Works, where he's greeted by this sign as he enters. He's at the cafeteria one day when, just like all of us guys have that story. All right, and you see, I remember when I saw my wife for the first time, I took a patient to her on the 9th floor of the hospital. He saw Eleanor Lemke in the cafeteria that day. They struck up a friendship, got very close, spent a lot of time together. The next thing you know, they're married. He joins the Navy. He's now old enough, and he ships out for the Pacific and destination unknown. This is all stuff that our family pretty much knew. See, I grew up in a military family. My dad was career Air Force, and we lived all over the world. We lived in Iceland, we lived in Guam, we lived in all over the States, and we did a couple years here and there. And no matter where we went, these are my grandparents in latter years, and you can see they're very proud of me. They got a couple pictures of me on the wall there. My grandparents, my grandmother is the one that made this happen. They were very, very present in our lives. It would have been easy not to be, right? We're traveling every 2 years. We're going to Iceland, we're going to Guam. But Grandma wanted to be a part of our lives. So no matter where we went, we would get cards for every holiday, every special event. We would get cards from her. We would get homemade blankets and homemade clothes, and she worked at Montgomery Ward then, and she got employee discounts, so we would get shirts and things like that. But the one thing in particular that was very special to me is we would get these little audio cassette tapes. And Grandma would sit at her kitchen table, and she would talk to us kids, to her grandchildren, and she would talk to us and tell us what was going on around home, what Grandpa was up to, what the latest gossip on her neighbor Ethel, what Scotty the dog was doing. And we would just sit there surrounded this player, and we still have them, and of course we've digitized it now to preserve them. But Grandma was very, very special to us. In 1998, my grandma contracted leukemia. And my mom asked me if I would go out to be there and to be with her when she passed away, and I chickened out. I couldn't do it. I will regret it to the day I die that I didn't go. But on the other hand, I don't have any memories of her wasted away and thin and incoherent. It was very selfish of me, but I didn't go. My sister Sarah went, and she did pass away. After that time, we got very concerned about my grandpa. Grandma was his rock. I remember when I was a kid, when I would go visit them, my bed was the fold-out bed, right? My bed was the cushions of the fold-out bed on the floor, right? Between the bed and the TV. And then Grandma would put a fitted sheet on it, and a pillow and a blanket, and it would always be turned down, right? It'd always be turned down, ready for you, very welcoming. And even when I became a teenager and I no longer had to be, I raided the fold-out bed finally, my bed was still, I wanted the cushions on the floor because that was Grandma's thing that she did for me. And one of my favorite memories of growing up and visiting Grandma and Grandpa is that when I was laying there in the night and I had my head in the pillow, Grandpa got up 0 dark 30, as you say in the military. He got up way early. And the sun wasn't out, and I remember when I would wake up because I'd hear something in the kitchen, and my vantage point now is I can see into the kitchen under the fold-out bed, right? Because I'm looking, and I can see Grandma's in there, she's got her house coat, and as I'm telling you right now, I can see it. Grandma's in there, she's making breakfast for Grandpa. And Grandpa's got the paper out, deep German voice, saying something to her, and they're commenting, I can't hear what she's saying. Then he comes over, and I can see him looking at that, and he kind of pats her butt or whatever, and he's just like, good grandchildren, man. And he laughs at her. And I have a grin on my face as I saw them, and I'd close my eyes again. And then I'd open my eyes the second time, and the sun is out. Grandma's in the kitchen, her house coat, now she's making breakfast for all of us. Grandpa's long gone, off to his jobs. Grandma was his rock. And my mom and her sisters became very concerned after she passed away. He started to talk very darkly. On August 11th, 1999, my grandfather woke up in the morning. He took his wedding band off. He put it on the kitchen table. He took his wristwatch off, put it on the table. He reached back, pulled out his wallet, removed his ID, placed it on top of his wallet, put it beside the other items. He wrote out a note to my Aunt Ellen. He called 911. The 911 operator says, 911, state your emergency. Then heard a pop! The operator from the report I read said they heard a thud, and they heard a sound of heavy breathing which ceased after about a minute. The police made entry into the home, and I found my grandfather dead with a self-inflicted .22 caliber bullet to his head. At that time, I was home in San Antonio. My parents were gone that day. My mom and dad had been saving money for a special getaway. Near San Antonio, where we're from, there's a German town called Fredericksburg. And it got great bed and breakfasts, great eateries, great shopping. And my mom had been saving money for a quilt. Now, to me, it's just another blanket. But to my mom, she knows all the work that goes into a quilt, how many hours go into it, and they are worth a lot of money. And she had been saving for this one for a long time, and she had the money in hand, and now her and Dad went out there for this bed and breakfast. I remember after I got the call, this was 1999. Our family, we didn't have cell phones, and my dad called home to check on his kids. He says, Dennis, how are things going? I says, terrible, Dad. Grandpa's killed himself. He says, Dennis, he was at a payphone. He says, I'm looking across the street right now, and Mom is coming out of the store. She has the biggest smile on her face. She sees me now, she's holding up the bag, she's got her quilt. And I've got this news. He says, get your sisters together, we'll tell Mom tonight. You know, my dad spent the whole day with her in Fredericksburg. And she held up a little shirt or a dress or a skirt and asked him, what do you think about this? Oh, it looks wonderful. It looks great on you. You know, he did that for her all day long. And in his heart, he was freaking dying. This is the love of his life, and there is absolutely nothing he can do to keep this catastrophe from coming her way. And then he had a 70-mile drive back to San Antonio, and every mile that clicked by, he was getting closer and closer to ruining and destroying the love of his life's world. And there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. I remember when Dad got home and Mom got home, we went in Mom's room, and Dad told her that your dad is dead, and my mom just started screaming. He killed himself, didn't he? He killed himself. And she started saying, Daddy, Daddy, why? Why did you do that? And I felt so, I'm the oldest son. I'm supposed to protect my mom. There wasn't that stinking thing I could do. I felt so powerless. I ran out of the room and I was just punching my pillow as hard as I could, crying. A couple years later, my dad called me and says, can you please come by the house? Mom's having a hard time. I went to the house and I found Mom crying at the kitchen table. She was thinking about Grandpa. I was massaging her shoulders. She spun around, she looked at me dead in the eye and said, Dennis, I want you to find out what happened to Daddy during the war. It caught me off guard. I said, why? She said, I have to know why he couldn't sit through a World War II documentary without crying. I have to know why when we were kids growing up, we would hear him scream out in the middle of the night and shout out. I have to know why he couldn't even sleep in the same room with Grandma. He had to sleep in a separate room. And when us kids would go by, we would see his bed looked like a typhoon had come through. All the sheets, the fitted sheet, everything was in a big ball in the center like there'd been a wrestling match all night long. She said, I think something terrible happened to Daddy. So I said, of course. I said, I'll find out what I can. But I got to tell you, I didn't think I was going to have any success. Not really. All I had was a naval picture which showed him, I knew he was in the Navy, but was he in the Atlantic, the Pacific? Was he stateside the whole time? Okay, then, what ship was he on? Had no idea. But I told my mom I would do it. So, along this journey, there's been so many times when there can only have been divine providential help. I was downtown San Antonio one time. I parked at the River Center Mall. I was walking between the old Manger Hotel where Teddy Roosevelt enlisted all of his Rough Riders and then the Josky building, and I'm walking through this historic place and I'm passing these gentlemen with blue caps with yellow stenciled lettering LCI Association, right? Why was that special to me? Because earlier my mom had reminded me that when I was a teenager I had a hobby that I would collect World War II veteran autographs. And she reminded me about a book that I had called War Against Japan by the Associated Press. This is the book. And you'll see when it opens here, I had my grandpa sign it. He signed it LCI 449, 2 years, 6 months, 43 to 45. So I figured, okay, LCI 449, that probably means landing craft infantry. I thought it was, Saving Private Ryan, the craft comes down, the ramp drops down, the guys come running out. I was way off. Then my mom reminded me that told me that there was a map in there where Grandpa had actually circled islands where he had been. He circled Iwo Jima, the Marianas, and Guam. When I saw Iwo Jima, I couldn't believe it. I was a World War II fanatic. I recall the first movie I ever remember seeing wasn't Mary Poppins or The Wizard of Oz. It was Von Ryan's Express with Frank Sinatra. I mean, I loved it. I loved the Americans' bravado. I loved the British who are always trying to connive and trying to get away all the time and escape. And I love the Germans who everybody agrees were the best dressed of World War II. So now I knew LCI 449, Iwo Jima. Then when I'm downtown and I see these guys walking around with a ball cap, LCI Association, I couldn't believe it. I'd stumbled on the gold mine. So I'm stopping everybody. You know, my grandpa was on an LCI. Oh yeah, son, which one? 449. Oh, I was on the 562, or the 629, or the 973. I was thinking, 973, how many of these things are there? I'm never going to find somebody from the 449. So I continue on. I'm down by the Riverwalk. Anybody ever been to San Antonio? Okay. I'm down the Riverwalk. I see two gentlemen sitting at the table. They're hunched over a table, and they're kind of looks like they're messing with, trying to discern the tip, because they're done, and they're getting up, and they're looking at the receipt, and they're reaching for their wallets, and I walk up and I say, oh, my grandpa was on an LCI. Oh, they didn't even look at me. Oh, yeah, son, which one? I says, at 449, and they freeze. And look over at me, 449? I says, yes, sir. I says, was your grandpa at Iwo Jima? I says, yes, sir. And his next question would set the tone for the next, what would prove to be the next 14 years. He said, did he survive? I said, yes, sir. Why? He said, son, that LCI was hit 3 times by mortars at Iwo Jima. They had a crew of 70, 21 of them were killed, and 22 were wounded. The captain of that gunboat got the Medal of Honor, the first of Iwo Jima. If your grandpa survived that, he had quite a story to tell. He never told you about that? No, sir. First I'm hearing of it right now. He says, son, when I get home, we're going to be here 3 more days. When I get home, I'm sending you a current roster of everybody in our association from the LCI 449. A week later, true to his word, I got that thing in the mail. 14 names. I started calling everybody on their list. Started calling Howlett, Banco, Hightower, Overchuck, Bedell. I'm calling all these guys. They're telling me they know guys. And then things are starting to be sent to me. I'm getting packages almost daily, getting letters and doing phone calls, and I'm sending out correspondence, and I'm learning more and more and more. And these guys know people who know people. And then I got a document that had the names of everybody that was on the ship at Iwo Jima. So now I got my goal. Now I got my mission, right? I got to track down every single one of these guys. And I can tell you to this date, of the 21 guys who were killed, I found family for every single one. Of the rest of the crew, of the 70, I found 63. And people say, man, how were you able to do all that work? I would have given up. Well, you wouldn't have given up if it was your mom that set you on the task. That's why I never quit. Here's some pictures of the ship, the LCI 449. You can see here, this is what they call the pilot house, or the conning tower. The pilot house inside there would be the helmsman, who has 2 levers, so she can turn this way and that way, and it turns the rudder of the ship. Then you have the bridge, where the officers would be. Then you have the gun deck, where there's a 40 millimeter here and here. On this picture, you can see those 40 millimeters facing forward. And the front, uncovered, is another 40 millimeter weapon. And then here's the 449 at Guam, after it had been secured. First fellow I want to talk about that I discovered on this journey is Robert Minnick. Robert Minnick's from Akron. He's a baseball player. He had it pretty rough growing up. His mom had him when she was 16. He never knew his dad. His grandfather was his father figure in his life. The one thing he had was sports, and it kept him very, very busy. He was one of those kids that's good at anything he touches. As a matter of fact, there's rumor in the family that he was actually scouted by the Indians in high school. All the major guys were off to war. They needed guys for their teams. That's the rumor. He was an amazing ball player. He had loving sisters and a loving mom who doted on him. He's remembered by Charles Halcombe because Charles Halcombe remembers him, knows that he was good at boxing because when they were going to Pearl Harbor, where they got orders to join the LCI 449, Minnick was on the deck of this small baby flat top, duking it out with some other guy that was harassing him, and the guy was 1.5 feet taller than Minnick was, and Minnick was holding his own. Everybody was marveling at the prowess of Robert Minnick of Akron with his fists. Here's some pictures of Minnick with his nephew. He's got his little sailor outfit. And that's Robert Minnick. Here's Leroy Young, uncle. Leroy Young was born and raised in Medina County. He attended Sharon and Bath schools. He lived on County Line Road, which I understand today is called Medina County Road. He had some neighbors, the Fundak family, and I had a really good talks with some of the Fundaks, and they told how that Leroy and them, when they were kids, they would get to the top of County Line Road in the winter, and they would get the trash can lids, and they would sled down County Line Road on the ice all the way down. They said, and of course to them it was like 1.5 miles, but probably not that long. For the kid, it seems that long. They told them that to help their families out during the hard years, the hard times, that Leroy Young and the Fundaks and Leroy's other siblings would work at a farmer's fields, help him reap the crops. They get the potatoes and whatever they were doing. And then she told how that this farmer was single and he had never married and didn't have any children, and that sometimes that he would get all the kids into his truck and he'd take them on into town and they'd all go see a movie together and he would reward them for their hard work. Of course, they were being paid pennies, but to them it was a big deal. The Mrs. Fundak, she told me that when they'd hang around, because the Fundak family, their dad had been killed in an accident, so they didn't have a dad, and times are hard. The 5 kids and the mom, they're all trying to do odd jobs, and Dorothy Fundak told me that they would kind of linger around the Young house whenever it was dinner time, and then they would hear Mr. Young bellow out, "I think I hear your mom calling you." So that was their cue that was their cue to head home. They're not getting a free meal tonight. This is Evelyn Moon. Evelyn Moon is the fiance of Leroy Young. She sent him this picture while he was aboard the 449. These are 2 of the most prized possessions in his life. Right? Evelyn Moon and this Model A, and she purposely framed it as because she knew that he really put a lot of time into restoring that Model A. And that you just can hear the guys on the ship riveting about this picture. Here's Leroy and Evelyn. February 11th, 1945. Leroy writes to Evelyn, "My dearest darling, this is the first chance I've had to write for a few days, so I better drop a line. This may be the last letter for a few days. I'm not sure." You see, this was last mail call before heading to Iwo Jima. They didn't know when they were going to get to send a letter. They didn't know what the future held. So everybody was encouraged, and everybody did send a letter on this date. "Even if I haven't been able to write, I've thought of you every second. I miss you more than words can tell. The last few days have gone pretty well, even if they haven't been much fun. You don't know how much I miss you, honey. Words can't explain it at all. Oh, why do they have wars? I love you, dearest, and until we can be together, I'll wait with high hopes. You're worth waiting for. We can't tell anything is the reason it's so hard to write a letter. Well, honey, I don't know if I will be able to mail this or not, so I'll make it a very short letter. I may not hear from you for several days, but I will keep my hopes up. Just remember, when you're in doubt, that I will always love you no matter what may come up. You're my girl, and I love you as much as anyone could ever love a person. I will close for now with all of my love forever, from the fellow who wants you for his wife, Lee. He signed it, I love you truly. And that was something special between Evelyn and he, because his name was Leroy, and everybody called him Lee. And so she came up with that I love you true, Lee. This is John Overchuck with that little arrows pointing to. He is the grandson of German immigrants. He's from Parma, Ohio. He was an avid dancer. I mean, the guys in the ship were just always marveling at the little dance moves and stuff that he would do for them whenever Lawrence Bozarns would have the radio going or be playing a record. Overchuck would be cutting a rug and jump up on top of the tables and start dancing, throw some rice on there and do a little. But when he's in the Pacific, he gets word that his beloved mother has passed away. And the skipper tells him, that you can go home if you want, and he takes him up on that. What's really astounding to me is that after the funeral, Overchuck goes to all the trouble to track down the 449 in the Pacific because he wanted to get back with his guys that he had served with through the Marshalls and the Marianas. You know how much effort that took? That took a lot of effort on his part and determination to get back to his guys, to his crew. He was very close to my grandfather. And I'll tell you, when I talked to those guys, and they would all talk about Overchuck and Lemke. Took him under my grandpa under his wing. So he's a very special person. Can you tell that he's a dancer by the way he's standing with his broom? You think he's seen a few Fred Astaire movies? Bill Corkins. He's from Cincinnati area, Springfield. His father, Earl, was a successful businessman. He owned a chemical business. He says, son, you're going to inherit this, whenever you get done with college. Went to Ohio State University. He graduated with a degree in agriculture. But the thing is that when Corkins was a teenager, during the summers, most kids are, just bumming around and not doing anything, getting into trouble. Corkins went to a farm. He went to the same farmer every summer, and during the summer he would work the farm. 3 months straight. And there was something about that he just loved. And he told his dad, I don't want the business, Dad. I'm sorry. I want to be a farmer. And he wrote poems about it. He was interviewed, and we have the transcripts. We actually were able to track down the transcripts from this college radio interview he did back then in the 30s. But he talks about his love of putting in a full day's work and having the dirt and grime and the smell of the soil, and then all the toil that you do, and then months later seeing the crops come up and you're reaping the harvest of all this hard work that you did. He's married and he has 2 sons. He is a fun-loving guy. He enjoys life and he wants to make every moment count. You see him here in Hawaii dancing with the little girls there. You see him doing one of those funny poses on the ship. I love the shorts. And here he is on Saipan. He was a commissary officer, so he had a lot of reasons and excuses to go ashore on Saipan, Guam to forage and get provisions. The guys loved it because he inevitably came back with fresh fruit that he had bartered for and things like that. He's a very jovial, lovable, likable guy, so no matter where he went, civilians flocked to him. They loved him. And he struck up friendships with people. And here, take these, here's some bananas. So he always had fresh fruit for the crew. They just loved it. You can see here he is clowning around on a cell in Saipan. Here's his wife, Dottie Corkins. They were able to meet up before he shipped out. And a picture of him with his boys, William and Jim. Leo Bedell. There's a scene at the end of the Schindler's List It's when the credits come up. This picture here is from his ID card in the military. That's the first time I saw it was yesterday. I had to include it. I love it. Looks like a movie star. Movie star in trouble. Right? It's a mugshot. There's a scene at the end of Schindler's List. And the credits are coming up, and you remember that scene? You remember what I'm talking about? When the families are walking up to Oskar Schindler's grave, and one by one they place a stone on his grave because every family member was a generation that he is there because of him. It was this really neat little custom, and they would put a stone, and hundreds of people went by, and then it just fast forward, and then at the end you see it's just covered with all of these stones. Do y'all remember that? No, I'm not Jewish, but I absolutely love that idea. I love that idea of paying respect to somebody, the generations that came along that are there because of him. So this is my stone for Leo. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. You see that stone? That's Leo's. Do you know what a heritage that is? People live a lifetime and never have that said about them. To have hundreds of people alive because of you, it doesn't get any better than that. Are you kidding me? There are people all across the states right now because of Leo Bedell and what he did at Iwo Jima. He saved my grandpa's life. His father was James Reno Baldelli. Yeah, you heard me right, Baldelli. He was born in New York. Was it the Bronx or Brooklyn? Brooklyn. Discrimination's horrible there against the Italians. He'd be working, Terry told me he'd be working and he'd scoop up cheese and people would come by and they'd mock at him this and that, and he'd plop it down on a piece of paper and wad it up and then hand it to him. That's how it was dispensed. The thing was that James Baldelli would do is he'd scoop up the cheese, turn around, spit in it, and then he'd give it. He suffered a lot of racism and discrimination in Brooklyn, and he had enough of it. So he got this offer to go to Oklahoma to apprentice to become a printer. And that started him on his journey to realize the American dream, what hard work can do. He became an apprentice, and that led to an offer in Missouri, which led to an offer to Akron, to Goodrich. He was a hard-working man. When he was in Oklahoma, that's when he was, I don't know who it was that told him, maybe one of the family can later tell me, but they told him you probably should change your name. So he did. And that's how he became Bedell. Leo Bedell was born in Oklahoma City on September 24th, 1921. In this picture, going left to right, you see Bob, Mary, Ted, and Leo with those rabbits. Those rabbits, they look like they've been handled like that a lot. They don't look too concerned. And here's another picture here, Ted, Leo, Bob, and Mary. Just having pictures like this says a lot about James Bedell. His photographs back then were not cheap. It was not easy to have done. The fact that he was able to do this for his family says a lot about the success that he enjoyed because of his hard work. Here's Leo. This is his mom, right? Who is this?
That's actually my Uncle Jack.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He was a sailor that house.
Yeah. Is that your mom?
No, it's my great aunt.
Great news. It's bad intel on that. That person has been fired.
There it is.
It was Leo and Mary Jo Costigan. My cable is just, I think Leo's upset that I called him Jack. Leo's gets his, he went and he signed up, he had a year left in college and he went to the Navy recruiter and they offered to pay for his last senior year in college if he would join the Navy. So it was a great deal. He wanted to serve. He did his last year, he joined the Navy, and he was going to ship out. He loved Mary Jo and he wanted to marry her, but I don't know why he didn't ask her before he left. But when he was in San Francisco, maybe the guys he'd been talking to, maybe he had been standing on the San Francisco Bridge and seen the ships coming from the Pacific and they were battered and smoking and torn up, and maybe he just saw the mortality that he was facing. But when he was there, he decided that he definitely wanted to marry her. So he bought an engagement ring, and he put it in an envelope with his proposal and sent it off. And it was accepted in kind with a letter. And here's some more pictures of Leo. You see Leo here in dead center right there with the white t-shirt. Here is Rufus Herring on the left with the binoculars. He's the captain of the ship who received the Medal of Honor at Iwo Jima. There's Byron Yarborough, his bunkmate, Leo's bunkmate. And then on the far right is Frederick Cooper from Iowa. I love that picture. I remember when I went to visit Leo, I walked up to his house when I went to interview him, and he was in the backyard and he was hunched over a trap. And he was talking about trapping squirrels, and he was going to release them in the park and make them somebody else's problem. And we went inside. He said, "Come on in, Dennis." And we went inside, and we sat down in the living room. I set up my tripod, my camera, my little bit audio recorder, and we talked for about an hour and a half. And in the meantime, Terry Bedell, one of his sons, had come and wanted to meet me. And when we broke, we took a little break because it was really taxing on him. I walked up to Terry, and we shook hands, and Terry said, "How's it going?" I said, It's been amazing, this conversation that I just had with your father, and when they got hit on the bow of the ship, and that leg flew over your dad's shoulder." Terry said, "What? Dad never told us that." I said, "Oh, well, he told me a lot more, sir." We broke for that lunch. Mary Jo wanted to make us some lunch, and I remember we were sitting in the dining room there, and she was making sandwiches and did some chips and things like that. And the counters are like this, and so she was going to this counter and then across to this counter to get the plates, and then this counter to get something else. And she was going back and forth, and she had several disabilities at the time, and so she walked very slowly. She walked about like this, right? That was the speed that she was going. Now, I worked in emergency room for 17 years. Know that's what happens to folks, the older that we get, and you have disabilities. It made no impression on me at all. But Leo felt he had to say something. So Leo leans over to me and says, "She don't get around good anymore." And I went, and we were startled across the room. "Don't get around good, but my hearing is fine." We laughed so hard. Oh man, he was so red. He was so red. Here's some of the crew of the 449 with the barracuda that they caught out there in the Pacific. Several of the guys in this photo will not survive Iwo Jima. Here's one of the gun crews: Chuck Banco, Anthony Serene, Hillman Ryan, and John Shire. Chuck Banco the skipper told him when they went to Ewo, that he says, hey, they told him, Banco, skipper wants to see you. So he's like, oh God, what do I do now? So he goes down there and, yes, skipper, you want to see me? He goes, Chuck, you got to shave your beard. We're going into Ewo. If there's an explosion, your beard's going to catch on fire. You can't, that's too much of a risk for hazard, getting injured. You're going to have to shave it. So Chuck did. And then he had a ball the entire day because nobody knew how this stranger got on a ship in the middle of nowhere. Nobody could recognize him. Leo Bedell's bunkmate was Byron Yarborough, a guy from Auburn, Alabama. Byron was the executive officer on the ship. He had been since it was commissioned all the way to Iwo Jima. He was the executive officer. Now, the executive officer on the 449 is the cop on the ship. Unenviable job. Right? You're the guy that's got to do all the disciplinary stuff. That means you are never topside in the middle of the night by yourself. Right? Because the guys get tossed overboard in the morning. Everybody's like, hey, anybody seen Byron? No. I ain't seen him. No witnesses, right? So that's why it's very dangerous to be up there when you're the cop on the ship. Right? So there's always had somebody with him. In addition to that, he had the duty of censoring the mail. Now that's important to this story because by this point, in September 44, when Leo Bedell comes aboard the ship and his bunkmates with Byron, it seems that everybody on the ship has a girlfriend, a fiance, a wife, everybody but him. All right? Normally, in normal circumstances, after the war, except for one thing. They had just come from Saipan. At Saipan, when the Marines were pushing north from the island, and they were pushing back the Japanese military, it was the first island where there was an actual Japanese civilian population. All right? For some reason, the Japanese military were telling all the civilians that in order to be in the Marine Corps, any Marines in here? In order to be in the Marine Corps, you had to have been in penitentiary. You had to have been, in prison. And the only way you were released was that you had to be a Marine and you were made to go fight. And they were known convicts and they were cannibals and they were going to murder and pillage everything. They were going to kill everybody. Killed women, children, they spared nobody. All right, so now put yourself in the position of a Japanese father. Any fathers in here? I am. Raise your hand if you're a father. All right. Put yourself in a Japanese father's position. You have your family around you. You can see on the hill this vaunted enemy coming your way. You see your military is not able to stop them. You turn around and all you see is ocean. And these are the guys that are going to come and they're going to take your children, they're going to murder them, and then they're going to eat them, according to testimony. Remember, there's no internet. You can't fact check this, right? This is taken as word. So, off of Marpy Point, the Japanese father would gather his children around his wife, and he would reach back and pull out a grenade, and he would pull the pin on that grenade in the middle of his family, and they would all blow up. The next family would come up and push them off the cliff, and they would repeat this. And if they didn't have a grenade, they would start with the oldest child who knew what was going on and would fight. They would start with the oldest child, grab them, and toss them off the cliff. And then work down until the baby was taken and dropped off. The mother calmly steps off, followed by the father. You can actually see this on YouTube. This is repeated by the hundreds. Meanwhile, down below is the crew of the LCI 449 just floating off of this cliff with an interpreter aboard, begging these civilians to please stop this madness. We're not going to harm you. We're going to be well treated. Please stop this insanity. But they don't stop. It goes on day after day after day. And the real horror happens a couple days later when the bodies surface, because now they're decomposing and they're full of gas. This is true life. So now the crew of the 449 wakes up in the morning, Byron Yarborough, my grandfather, and they all come out, and they just see the ocean is just covered with these children and the babies and these families floating all around their ship. And the flies that have been feasting on the death on Saipan come out on the ocean and they land on all these bodies, and then they descend on the ship. And they're getting into the galley, they're getting into the food, they're getting into the place where the fellows sleep. And the word comes down from the medical director, we got to get rid of these bodies, fellas. We know you don't want to do it, but we got to do this. So they dispense rifles, and the guys go out on the ship, and they start shooting all of these children, their bodies. Now these guys have got kids back home. And do you think that they signed up for that? A year before my grandpa was watching a John Wayne movie in the Rex Theater in Park Falls. And now there's all these kids floating around here, and they have to shoot them, and they have to take pikes and poke them, trying to get them to sink because of this medical hazard. All right, so what's happening in their minds right now? Right? This is descent into madness that's taking place. And it also does something else to the guys in the 449. This is very, very important to Byron Yarbrough, is it tells them that they're never going to get home. They're going to die out here. Because if these civilians are doing this here at Saipan, what are they going to do when we get to the main islands of Japan? We're never going to get home. We're going to have to kill every single Japanese just to get home. We're going to die out here. So now you're Byron Yarbrough, you're censoring mail, and you're seeing all these guys that are saying, I love you so much, and you got lipstick-sealed kisses on envelopes and letters, and he opens up a letter, and perfume comes out and hits him in the face. It's just a dagger in the heart, because he's going to have lived his life and never loved anybody. Never have known that. And he gets incredibly lonely out there. Betty Jones is from Cordele, Georgia. She wants to be a nurse. Her uncle says, take to school, I got you covered. Mama says, you're not going anywhere. Your job is to stay home and help Dad run the family store in Cordele, Georgia, the watermelon capital of the world. All of Betty's friends, all of her girlfriends, are all off taking government jobs. They went to Atlanta, they went to Washington, D.C., they went to New York City. What are they doing? They're sending her letters. Oh my gosh, we got to see Harry James Orchestra, we got to see Benny Goodman, we saw, this celebrity, look at the New York Life and this and that. Now here's Betty, right? Yeah, she's sitting in the watermelon capital of the world, losing her mind. All the guys her age are gone, military. Betty Jones has a cousin, Mary Ballinger, in college. Her roommate is a young lady named Jane Yarbrough. Does the last name sound familiar? Yarbrough? And they're talking to him. She says, oh, my cousin back home, she's so miserable. She's like, oh man, my brother's got nothing on your cousin. Let me tell you about my brother. He is out there in the Pacific. He is so lonely. So an idea hatches in their minds. What if we get these two to write each other? That's all Byron wants is mail from somebody. So one day Byron is out there and the mail call comes. He gets the mail bag, he reaches down, and he pulls out, Overchuck, here. All right, you guys pass it back to Overchuck. He pulls it. Another one, Johnson, here. Johnson, here. All right. He reaches down and it's, oh, must be Mom. He looks over. Hey, Jones. Cordele, Georgia. I'm almost done. Everybody okay? All right. This is a picture of the LCI 449. They're heading into Iwo Jima. You can just barely make it out, but Mount Suribachi is right here. It's very faint in this photograph. This is hours before they go in. This is the only photograph that survived. There was a photographer that was sent aboard the 449. The movie that I showed before, the photograph of the gunboat that was slaughtered, all the guys that were killed, that were put into those mattress covers and sewn in. Those were the crew from the 441, which was right next to the 449. I like to use those photographs because it shows you what happened that day, and it sets the tone for what we need to talk about. We don't have anything from the 449 because the photographer, Harry McGrath, a young kid from Washington State, he was killed. And his bag of photographs and everything was blown apart, and his newsreel footage that he had been shooting of the 449 of our relatives and the guys, he was shooting newsreel footage, and that was blown apart, and there were streams fluttering across the blood-soaked deck. This is the only photograph, and this was taken out of his smashed camera. This is the mission. This is who they're going in. This gunboat here is the 474. This is the 438. And this is a 449 with Leo Bedell aboard, Leroy Young aboard, my grandfather, Clifford Lemke, and 64 other guys. This is the 441 and the 457. Of course, you see Mount Suribachi right here. Within an hour and a half, this ship will be on the ocean floor. And these will all be hit. The 474 was fortunate in that they were able to pull up alongside a destroyer and get their casualties off, but their dead did go down with the ship. These are the 5 guys from Ohio. Robert Minnick, Leroy Young, John Overchuck, Bill Corkins, Leo Bedell. Three of them are going to die. When I look back on this journey, 14 years, and now there's a book, to tell you the truth, I never thought it would ever. I thought I would end up publishing something at Kinko's and it would be a little thing and I would sell it. You know, that's realistically what I thought was going to happen. But it's a beautiful product, beautiful book, and an amazing story written by a fellow that I asked to write the story, Mitch Weiss, Pulitzer Prize-winning author, who I approached with all of my research. He said, I remember when I went to him and I said, would you be willing to do this story? He says, mind you, he's got 5 successful books, Pulitzers, so I hear I'm, nobody. And I come up to him and, well, if it's going to be any good, we're going to have at least 20 interviews. I said, I got 300. He's like, wow, you've done your work. I says, yes, I have. And I've got 400 letters uncovered from guys who were killed on the mission. And hundreds of pages of action reports, war diaries, deck logs from the archives. I've got everything. So he was like, let's do this. When I look back on all that, all the work that went into it, all the interviews, traveling all over the states, and when you say that you found 300 people, that's 300 names that you just initially had just a name. Arthur Stein, right? Okay. You got to track them down. Then you got to convince this person to tell a complete stranger something about the most darkest day of your life, something that they didn't even tell their own family about. You got to convince them to tell you. That's why I think I was meant for this, because I was able to convince 300 people to do it. When I look back on all that, and I look back on everything that happened, the closure from the families, farmer Bill Wilcox, who through the research and the documents, I was able to get him disability so he could keep supporting his wife. Howard Schoenleben, who I was able to tell him that his dad's dying words was his name 3 times. Howard Schoenleben died in Leo Bedell's arms. He looked in Leo's eyes and he said, Howie, Howie, Howie. And he died. And when Leo told me that story, I said, that had to have meant something. And I got a hold of one of the fellows. I says, did you know Howard? He goes, yeah. He said, Dennis, before we left Saipan, the mail caught up to us, and Howard got a letter from his wife saying, we got a son, and I named him after you, Howard. So I knew what Howie meant. And I also knew I needed to find him. And when I called him and I said, what do you know about your dad's death? He said, all I know is that we got a letter from an officer, Leo Bedell, saying that he had died at his post. He was buried at sea per naval tradition. I said, Mr. Schoenleben, I have an amazing story to tell you. Your dad said your name 3 times and died. I look back at all that, all the people, the lives that have been changed, all the lives impacted, the story. No one knows it even happened. No one knows that these guys were there 2 days before the Marines were even at Iwo Jima. Did you guys know that? They were there 2 days before the Marines were even there, doing this recon mission. This group of 12 gunboats, 700 sailors in all, would take 54 guys killed, 150 wounded, They would receive a Medal of Honor, 13 Navy Crosses, dozens of bronze and silver stars, Presidential Unit Citation, and nobody even knows it happened. Until now. But you know what it all goes back to? I can't even say it. It goes back to my mom saying, I want you to find out what happened to Daddy during the war. And a son's love for his mom that wouldn't stop. Well, thank you all for coming. Lisa, how are we doing on time?
We're good.
We're
Good.
okay?
You want to do a Q&A now?
If you guys need to leave, go ahead. I'm going to open it up for Q&A if anybody has any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir.
Just one comment. Thank you for doing it.
Yes, sir. Proud to. Yes, John.
Two. Who was the shipmate, Dennis, at the Riverwalk that you?
Yeah, that was
Who was
there was a guy named Bill Brinkley and David Cox. David Cox was the association chaplain. He wasn't on the mission, but Bill Brinkley wasn't on an LCI either. He was on the battleship Nevada that was covering them, and he was the admiral's signalman. So he watched the whole thing, and he couldn't believe. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was seeing these LCIs getting hit over and over and over again, but they stayed in there to cover the frogmen so they could do their recon of the beaches to ensure the Marines could get in. As a matter of fact, the radio message was asked by Admiral Blandy. They thought that it should have been put into the annals of naval terminology to go down in history because the 469 gunboat came over the radio and said, "Fires under control, request permission to return to the firing line." Not fires extinguished, fires under control, request permission to return to the firing line. And see, Bill Brinkley never forgot that, and it impressed him so much. He made it his mission to find out everything he could and to honor those guys. So as the years went by, he went to the archives, he got a bunch of videos and footage, and that's how we have a lot of this stuff. It's from Bill Brinkley.
And then from on the book, there's obviously Weiss's narration of things that running through characters' heads or what had happened. But the conversations that are in quotes, are those pulled, Dennis, from letters or your interviews with people, the conversations between characters that are in quotes in the book? Where are those?
I would say that 90% of the stuff that's in quotes came from, because I got covered like 400 letters, and then I had 300 interviews. Of course, there was only 70 guys in the ship, so I interviewed guys that were there or their command ship, battleships, things like that, then their families. In the case of the guys who were killed, I found like brothers, sisters, moms. So, and in the other cases, you took some license because you know what they would have been talking about in certain circumstances, and so you made some conversation about that. But what's unique about this book is that it's told from the perspective as if you're an unnamed sailor aboard the ship, and you're just viewing everything that's going on. It's very unique. It's been described by the Naval Institute as a sort of a band of brothers for the Pacific and the Navy, and that's a really good compliment. It's on the New York Post must-read list, New York Journal of Books, National Museum of Pacific War, Naval Institute. So, everyone is really saying, well done. And that all is reflected on all the research that went into it. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us, put in perspective, the number of Navy that were killed in the South Pacific versus the number of Marines?
Yeah, actually on the 2nd of this month, I presented a program for the VFW in San Antonio, VFW Post 76, and they were celebrating VJ Day, the Victory Over Japan Day. And so they wanted me to talk about that and allowed me to talk about the book. And one of the things that I divulged to everybody that I had no idea, that the Coast Guard lost about 1,500 guys during World War II. All over. The Marines lost 23,000. The Navy lost 60,000. That's surprising. But when you think about it, every time the Indianapolis goes down or the Saratoga goes down, that's hundreds of guys. I just assumed that the Marines would have, they talk so big all the time. Yes, sir.
There was one character, Ralph Johnson, the African-American. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, Raphael Johnson. Can you imagine being the only African-American sailor on a ship of 70 white guys? 1943, 1944. His rating, he's a steward's mate. That means butler to the officers. It's a fancy way in naval terminology of saying butler. So you would think, well, maybe, hopefully, his service on the ship, maybe the guys were like from Connecticut or New Hampshire. The captain was from North Carolina. The executive officer was from Auburn, Alabama. And if you were to assume that his experience would have been hell on earth, you would be wrong. It was really surprising to me. And it made sense to me when I was speaking at Auburn University in March. And we were at the Yarborough home, which had been incorporated into the college. And they had all the Yarborough family pictures laid out. And you see the Yarborough family, Dr. Cecil Yarborough with his family and extended family, and they're all there with the help. All in this big group family Christmas picture with their arms around each other's shoulders, all in this big intermingled all together for this big Christmas family picture. And it all made sense as to why Raphael was treated as just one of the crew. And he was promoted above the others to made into a gunner. Excuse me, if you have problems with the African-American guy, you're not going to make him a gunner, because that puts him in a position to have the life of the crew and the ship in his hands. He was respected, honored, and promoted. It speaks highly of not only Raphael Johnson's as a person, but also the officers who I think were ahead of their time. Yes, sir.
So you did all this research yourself?
Yes.
You had no additional manpower helping you pursue all this?
No, sir.
I think it's very interesting. Can you share with us a little bit more how you got people to cooperate on phone calls and knocking on doors and driving up driveways? And you did this all by yourself, correct?
Yes. The thing is that people can tell your sincerity. They can see your heart, right? And that goes a long way. I remember one fellow, Junior Hollowell, Texan. I called him up. This is how he answered the phone. Hello! Boom! He hung the phone up. My God! I forgot my name. I forgot what I was calling about. I got it. All right, let's do this again. This guy, I can't believe this guy had the nerve. Why? Sir, this is Dennis Vlog. I'm calling. Boom! He hung up again. My God! Everybody else has been so cool. I says, all right, I got him this time. He calls up, he answers, what do you want? I go, LCI 449. What about it? My grandpa was on there. Well, all right, I was too. Well, all right, let's talk about it. Okay. We had a 45-minute conversation, and that was it. Never talked to me again about it. His daughters couldn't believe he talked to me. That was the only time. And that's when I found out that he was the steward's mate. He was his best friend on the ship. And he was his loader for the gun. And I was thinking about, what if I had quit? You know, what if I had, well, I guess he's not going to talk to me. What if I'd given up? You know, that's the key, is just perseverance and tenacity and not giving up. Having a good heart, being sincere about it, being real with people, not being fake. And I would write these letters to everybody and just pour my heart out. And usually what I would do is I would put pictures in there. You know, I put pictures of my grandpa, pictures of the ship, and they would see that. I'm like, well, this guy's legitimate. You know, he's actually. So you look for ways to get in. I remember when I called Bruce Hallett, and he answered the phone, and I says, I was wondering if you were on the LCI 449, sir, with my grandfather. Yes, I was. Just a minute. Put the phone down, and then I could hear him vomiting into the sink. See, when I said 449, it took him back 60 years to when he was laying against the railing of the ship, burned and full of shrapnel. And he was watching as his shipmates were being taken out of the bridge in buckets. And you heard me right. He was watching his shipmates coming out of the bridge in buckets. And it took him right back. His wife says, can you call back tomorrow? I says, I'm never calling again. Are you kidding me? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do this. I'm just trying to find guys with my grandfather. No, you need to call back. He wants to talk to you. And I did, and we became very, very close. We got to meet on several occasions. He called me Denny. Great guy. Yes, sir.
When you were able to get through to people, were they interested to know who you had talked to and wanted to know what you knew
Definitely.
about others?
I'm glad you said that because Bruce Hallett told me in a conversation about Chuck Banko and how sorry that he had died. I talked to Chuck Banko last week, sir.
Oh.
What? Yeah, he made it. Well, see, they were both wounded. And they were just stuck in a stretcher, and they thought the other guy had died. They were buddies. And they lived a few miles apart from each other for 60 years and never knew that the other guy had survived. So they were able to get together, and I got some pictures of them, hanging out together with their families and stuff. Yeah.
I'm sure one of the payoffs, Dennis, to piggyback off Uncle Johnny's question, is the book has got to be sort of the ultimate, payoff for you. But I wonder what it was like for you to see families of these shipmates reunited, or like in San Antonio, to see shipmates, or in, I think it was 08 when we were in Branson with you, myself and Dad and Buck came with us to Branson, Leo. To see him meet, probably for the first time since the war, guys like Hallett, who else was in Branson with us? Bill Hildebrand.
Yeah, that was
or
pretty
Leo
powerful.
even meeting Howard Schoenleben. What was that like for you to see specifically the vets, reunite with each other?
It's really surreal. It's really surreal because these are guys that you really look up to and you respect, and now they're looking at you and they're so thankful, and they just respect you, and they're thankful for what you did. And you see the look on their faces when they see each other and they hug each other and they go off by themselves and start talking and wiping tears from their eyes. And I'll never forget when I walked up to Leo Vidal with Howard Schoenleben Jr. We hadn't told Leo that Howard was going to be there, so we weren't sure he was going to make it. Remember, Howard was in his arms and he died? I remember I walked up to Leo and I said, Leo, I got somebody I want you to meet. And he kind of went, oh yeah? He had this kind of a little look on his face like I had peanut butter in my lips and I didn't know it or something. Like, oh yeah? And I said, this is Howard Schoenleben Jr. He went pale. I'm like, really? And those two, he put his arm around his shoulder and they walked off. And they sat down together at a table, and man, I wish I could have heard what they said to each other. It's pretty powerful. Yes, ma'am.
Obviously, PTSD wasn't something that was a term back then. What were these men doing to cope? Or was there anything? Did they just
That's a
ignore
very
it?
good question. My grandpa, to cope with it, my grandpa drank alcohol. He was a functioning alcoholic, so he drank, but he still worked, provided for his family. He provided everything that he could. But one thing that he never gave to my mom, and my mom talked to me a lot about, was he never gave her love. Like, I have daughters. It's very important for me, every morning and every night, and dozens of times during the day, to tell them and look them in the eye and kiss them on the head and say, I love you. Very important to me, right? And my mom, that's what she craved from him. And he would be on the verge of telling her that sometimes, and he would even have a tear in his eye, and he wanted to say it. Something had died in him, and he couldn't do it. And she remembers when she was 7 years old, and she was in the hospital getting her appendix out. She got a card from him, and there was a $10 bill inside. She cannot tell you what she did with that $10, but she can tell you that on the inside was written, I love you, from him, to this day. The way that Leo Vidal dealt with it, I think, is he just didn't talk about it, and he shelved it in a special place in his heart. He locked it, and he threw the key away, and he just never went there. He didn't seek out any guys from the 449. If they came to him, he was fine with that, but he made no active effort to know any of the guys or pursue them. He got on with his life. Those guys were molded by the Great Depression. They were molded by the Great Depression. And that had made them men way early. Men and women, way early. They're far more mature than I was when I was 18. So they had a good background to deal with what they did. But obviously they had it. I mean, my grandpa was screaming out in the middle of the night his entire life. Yes, ma'am?
It's a comment. I've noticed in watching the documentaries of the World War II vets, compared to other wars. My brother was over in the vault. He's a great man. But when you watch the World War II vet talk, they're a whole nother crowd.
It's true. It's very true. Did you hear what she said? She said that with the documentaries that you see, when you see the World War II veterans talk about their experience, it's a whole other crowd than if you hear somebody from the Gulf talking about the war or Afghanistan. There's this hardness and maturity. Yes, sir?
Let's go back to the beginning of this for just a second. I'm curious, what was your mother's reaction when she saw the book and knew that you had got to the answer?
So we got my mom to the Tower of America restaurant under false pretenses, right? We got her up there for, we were celebrating my sister Marnie being cancer-free, breast cancer. And so we had her up there and we were, toasted Marnie. We're so thankful, this and that. And this was February 23rd. And then the book was published on March 1st is when it was released. So I stand up and I says, I'm so thankful for Marnie, it's that, it's Marnie, it's Marnie. Now I got one more thing to say. And I said, Mom, just think, right now all across the country on planes, on trains, on UPS trucks, FedEx trucks, the book is crisscrossing the country right now, going to people's homes who pre-ordered, going to bookstores, heading all over the country right now, all because of you. All because you said, I want you to find out what happened to Daddy during the war. And on March 1st, they're going to have it. But not you. She's like, what? What do you mean not me? See, I had made arrangements with the publishers. I says, because you get the first one. Book number 1. As you can imagine, it was pretty emotional. Mom finished it in a couple weeks' time, and she sent me a 3-page letter. Her thoughts on the book, and how she had cried for 2 hours straight when she finished the last line. Personally, my favorite part of the book was the epilogue. I really enjoy the epilogue. When she got done with the epilogue, she just cried for 2 hours straight. And she said, now I know. Now I know. And that book now, it's an imperial cabinet. It's got its own little stand and a light.
Did any of your work, Dennis, for the guys that didn't keep, maybe just after 45, just didn't talk to each other, didn't even maybe know where they were at, did your work and you putting them all kind of in touch, mid-2000s, did that spark any correspondence or friendship with these guys that maybe had not?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That
Charles Hightower in particular, Bill Hildebrand. A lot of the recipient of that was actually, as you know, your grandpa. Leo Bedell would get a Christmas card from one of the survivors every Christmas. And the inside it said, "Thank you for another Christmas." That's something. That's good stuff. But yeah, these guys, they would write each other and get together and talk on the phone. The guys, hey, can you give me? What was really interesting is that these guys were calling me and they're like, hey, what happened when we went in and we got hit here? What happened? Well, I was the expert now, right? Because these guys, when they were there, they were concerned with their 5 feet of real estate. They didn't know. So now they're calling me to tell them what happened on their mission. That was really an honor. Is that it? Yes.
And it's just one quick one. Are any of the guys still surviving that were
There, I was able to track down 23 survivors, and of those, there are 3 left. So when I got there, it was the exact last moment possible to get the story. Because now there's only 3. Yes, sir.
Did any of the crew members attend Lucas Herring's Medal of Honor ceremony? Or were they invited?
No, they were, the officers from all the gunboats got the Navy Cross, and then he got the Medal of Honor, and they were flown back to the States, given a ceremony. He had been in the hospital for like 2 years after this mission, because he's gravely wounded. And so he was just in the hospital himself, still under care. So he was stateside. The guys, they all lost touch. One thing that a lot of the families have that lost somebody is they have a letter from Leo Goodell. A lot of the families have letters from Leo Goodell. They've been sharing these letters with me that I told you about, and almost inevitably a letter comes from Leo Goodell. Because he had taken over that job of notifying the families. And you know, the families don't think about it, but every time that they would write Leo Goodell, it would take them right back to that time. You see, Leo Goodell is the youngest officer on the ship. All right? I want everybody to put yourself in his shoes. You are the youngest officer on the ship. This is your first combat mission. You've been in the Pacific for only 3 months. All right? Now, you are the only one on your feet. 3 are dead and 3 are wounded. You're the last one standing. It's your first mission. You're the youngest, and now you're in command. Anybody want that job? That's what Leo Goodell found himself. And that's why there are active efforts right now to get his Silver Star upgraded to the Medal of Honor.
Sorry, I like questions. I'm a reporter. Did you find, Dennis, was there a common thread with the families where, I know like in Buff's instance, he didn't talk a lot about it until you showed up. Was that a common thread? Did you find that with a lot of the shipmates?
Yeah, definitely. The guys didn't talk about it. They told their families the good times, you know, partying on Mogmog Island, drinking beer, and harassing the other ships, and the paint parties, and going ashore on Saipan, and the times they got to go offshore on Pearl Harbor, and checking out the Guamanian girls because they wore real skirts, and they'd be out washing naked out there, out of their huts, and the guys are out, you know, this and that, getting in trouble with the MPs and Shore Patrol. They had told all those stories, but they didn't tell any of them. That's why when I would tell the families, I would go back and I would say, that was amazing when your dad, said blah, 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 and they're like, Dad never told us any of that stuff. All right, Lisa, you want me to make that announcement about one of the frustrating thing right now that I have been dealing with the last couple of days is that the books that we ordered did not come in, and the person that was supposed to take care of that didn't. And so this happened on the trip in Wisconsin. So if you wanted to get a book and you would like me to personalize it, which I would absolutely love to do, I got with Lisa, and what we did is the same thing that we did in Wisconsin when this happened, is that if you will go see Lisa, and where are you guys going to be?
We're going to be up in this corner.
Up in this corner over here. If you'll go see her and give her your name and phone number and pay for the book, just give her the money. She's going to keep a hold of it. And I have books that are coming. So then when they get here, they're scheduled to be here day after tomorrow. When they get here, I'm going to come up to the library. I'm going to have a list of everybody's names, and I'm going to personalize them for everybody that came. And then I'll leave the books with her, personalized for everybody, and then she's going to call everybody and tell you to come and get your books. I think that's a pretty good answer to that problem. But I really do encourage you to read the book. It's an amazing story. Nobody knows it ever happened. And it's got 5 guys from this area that are in there, and in particular, Leo Goodell's story. Good? All right, thank you all.